Hi friends, I'm going to give you a little tour of some of the features that I find most valuable in Penpot. So here's a design I made earlier for a landing page. You can grab this demo file from the Penpot community. I'm trying to make the most here of the most modern design features, including responsive layouts and design tokens. So using a combination of responsive layouts and design tokens, I can do something cool like, say, switch between different breakpoint sizes. So I can choose to preview how my design might work across mobile and desktop and tablet breakpoints here. And because Penpot creates all design as code, I can select this board and go to Inspect panel, and I can choose to go to the code. I can grab the HTML, pop it in here, and the CSS. And this is CodePen, and it's just allowing me to very quickly render my HTML and CSS as it would in the browser. And as you can see, this design looks exactly the same in the browser as it does inside Penpot. Now, if you're anything like me, you're quite particular about the code that you want to use as part of your design. And so there are plugins available to help you do that. For example, you can see there's an HTML to design plugin there. You can use a Tailwind HTML plugin, there's a Tailwind styles plugin. There's also this fabulous semantic-tagging plugin, which allows you to specify specific HTML elements for each of your design objects. So that way you can be truly semantic in the code that you create. And of course, there's also the Penpot MCP if you want to use AI as part of your design workflows. Jumping back into that panel, this is the styles view where you can see your properties for each selected element on the board. This is showing me design tokens that are in use, any relevant design token themes and sets. It's showing me specific CSS properties, as well as things like the CSS layout. So you might have noticed here that I'm making use of CSS Flex layouts, and that's one of the really cool features of Penpot, is it's using genuine CSS Flex and CSS Grid layouts, which you can utilize so that they do render exactly as they would in the browser. So let me grab, I don't know, say a button for a very basic idea here. This is using a Flex layout, so I can determine the Flex direction, I can choose whether it wraps or doesn't wrap, and I can specify the spacing and padding around an element, and I can use design tokens for that. So you can see here the design tokens that are in use for this particular element. And I can choose options like how my object should fill or fit its container or its content, or use a fixed size. So I have control over all of that exactly in the way I would using CSS. And so this is creating a shared language between designers and developers. We're not trying to abstract away any terminology here. We're all learning and using the same terms, making it much easier to communicate between the design and development processes. We also have CSS Grid. I'm going to jump into my dashboard here. The dashboard itself isn't using Grid, but some of the components here are, this card component is using Grid. It's actually using Grid inside Grid. So I can go down to this very specific element down here, and I'm using grid columns and rows. I'm even using named grid areas. That's also a possibility that you can do if you want to combine multiple grid cells in order to create a grid area. You can do that just as you would in CSS. And here you can see that my columns are using that fraction unit, which is unique to CSS. And that's telling me that each of these grid areas should use one fraction of the available space. So exactly as you would in CSS, you can design those CSS grids. If I go a little bit more into design tokens here, so Penpot is the first design platform to natively support the design tokens format created by the design tokens working group. And so that means you can import existing design tokens from other platforms, and you can also export your design tokens in the JSON format. So that's platform agnostic, and it's really easy to sync and consume as part of your dev process as well. And design tokens, these are great because we can have different sets that contain the same tokens, which we can turn on and off using themes. which can enable things like a light mode and a dark mode. It can enable the creation of different brands if you want to have a multi-brand design system. So I can switch up the brand colors and typography and really anything I want, and then very quickly switch between to preview how those should behave. Another feature that enables your design systems is things like components. So you can create a component library, and I can access that from the assets panel. Here I have a system library that's connected to my file, and I can pull in components from that library. So for example, my card component here, I can pull that in. And if I look at that in a bit more detail, I have different variant options. I can do things like toggle the description on and off. I can choose whether there's an image or no image, whether it's a variant that uses a text and a button, a graph, an image. And inside of that, I can also have control over the button component, and I can choose maybe I don't want an icon in that button component. I want it to utilize the secondary style. These styles are also using design tokens. If I scroll down here, you can see that it's using the button secondary styles. But jump into the Penpot dashboard, you can get a little overview of how that system works. So this is the system library file that has been published as a library, and that's why it's got this little icon here. And this design mocks file is consuming that library. Libraries are shared throughout the entirety of your team, and you can switch between your teams in the top left-hand corner. Other things that are shared between your teams as well as your libraries are your fonts, so you can upload any custom fonts that you're using to ensure compatibility across your team, and that way you don't need to ensure that your team already have fonts installed on their specific devices. You can also, from this team view, manage your team, like the different members of your team and their roles, and you can create invitations to invite people in and assign them those roles at that point as well. If I look at my system library file, so this is actually containing demos of the different design tokens. I think that's quite a nice way of documenting my design system. And I can also do things like, for example, I've got an accessible color test in here, so I can test the different colors of my design tokens to ensure their compatibility. It's one of the benefits of design systems is being able to make these design decisions up front. And so any designer consuming that system can be sure that when they're using those design tokens, they're going to be accessible combinations. I might use one of these plugins. I've got the contrast plugin. So say I select the background color and the text color, and I can test the contrast of those colors together. Plugins are very valuable during the design process for these kinds of things. It's very easy also to make your own plugins. You can just work with the Penpot plugins API, and I did this myself. So I made myself a plugin for accessible design. I just made a little checklist plugin, which works for each file, where I can check off different accessibility features to remind myself and make sure that I've considered all of the accessibility implications during my design. Let me jump back into my design mock, and I can show you prototyping. So if you want to create clickable prototypes out of your design, you can also do that in Penpot. I'm going to open up that menu overlay. And so, for example, if I wanted to preview how a button menu might work, if I select that button and I go to the prototype panel, you can see the interaction that I already have planned using this button. And I can either preview it from view mode or using this menu overlay flow here. So that will open up view mode. And then I can do things like testing out how an overlay might work. I can choose to hide the interaction so it doesn't give me that little cue there. And I can include some simple animation in there as well. And maybe I actually want to go back and test how that would also work in, say, desktop view. So I can go to my desktop breakpoint and I can maybe go straight into view mode from here and test out how that menu would work in desktop as well. Now, I've showed you quite complex uses of Penpot, but that doesn't mean that you can't use Penpot for some of the simpler things. And if you're not sure about how you want to get started with Penpot, we do have loads of libraries and templates created to help you get started or to help you have a look at how other people use some of Penpot's features. If I go back into the Penpot dashboard, you can also grab some of these libraries and templates directly from the Penpot dashboard. So for example, maybe I want to try out whiteboarding. I can very quickly add that to my project. Let's add that in there. So I've got that enabled. That's already a library. And maybe I'm going to go into a planning session and I'll connect that library to my file, the whiteboard mapping library. And that gives me a whole bunch of components. So maybe I want to have a discussion. So I'll add that in there and I'm going to detach this component so I can interact with it and make changes to it. And then perhaps my collaborator is going to come in and start working alongside me. And I don't know, maybe they want to add some other elements to our little discussion and I can work with them together in real time, whether we're working across an office or across a call or even just asynchronously.